Hi team, welcome to my session on Coffee with Prab, and today we're going to discuss about interview questions which is mostly asked in ITGC jobs. Now these questions are not something about teaching some concepts and all that. In this particular video, the questions that I'm going to discuss, this has been asked from the candidate in their ITGC jobs. So I have a lot of folks when they give interviews in ITGCs and all that. So I used to have a call with them to understand what kind of questions the interviewer basically asks. So based on that, I am starting this series of ITGC interview. My name is Prab and I have a 17 plus year of experience in the GRC. For more information, you can check my LinkedIn profile, and if you're new to the channel, do check my do subscribe to my channel and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss my future videos on a similar topic. So without wasting a time, let's start with the first part. Thank you. Okay, so first question, which is a very common question asked by the technical interviewer and all that. Can you walk me through your process for independently testing the ITGC control to determine their design and operating effectiveness? Because see, normally in the ITGC jobs and all that, whether it is mapped with SOX, SSAE and all that, so we have to do the testing of control. So as an interviewer, he was expecting or she was expecting, the basics. Okay, the process. If they're hiring for experience profiles and all that, if they're looking for experienced candidate and all that, so they mostly ask this question: do you know the process, how to test the controls and everything? So my suggestion is basically, if you have a zero experience, then this is basically where you have to play, you do some little bit acting. Okay, or if you have not worked on this area, you're not very confident, but you have to bring that experience. Understood? So how to answer? So as I say, how to answer such questions. So if you ask me, in one of my interviews, I say, okay, in my experience, there is a process which is begin with understanding the control environment and its objective. And I start by reviewing documentations to identify the controls in place and their intended purpose. So here what happened, I will basically talk about the process. The first step is basically understand the control environment and objectives. Okay, for example, and here what I'm doing is I'm going to add some examples. So that builds some credibility and it builds the confidence. For example, when I'm saying understanding a control environment objective, how to answer such things is, let's take example. In my experience, the process began with understanding the control environment and its objective. And I start by reviewing the documentations to identify the controls in place and their intended purpose. For example, if I'm testing the access control, let's take example. If I'm testing the access control, because access control is also one of the ITGC, information technology general control. So if I'm testing the access control, so I will look for the policies of access controls, because policy basically talk about design of control. Okay, I will look at the policy that describe how the user access should be managed. And next I will conduct the interview with the key stakeholder to gain insight into the operational aspect of the control, because sometimes what happen is the control what we have is not necessary is implemented thoroughly. I will give one more example is like every system must be protected with the 8-character password. So that is basically a policy. So we have reviewed the policy documentations. Second is review the documentations and identify the controls. So here we have taken the example, that access rights are reviewed every quarter or system should be protected with 8-character password. So I will check if there is a documented process for that. So whatever, I also select the sample periods, say like last 6 months, and check if the access completeness. So this is how I'm going to answer. So here you can see I'm explaining the process also. Testing the access control, I will look for the policies that describe how the user access should be managed. And next I will conduct the interviews with the key stakeholders to gain insight into the operational aspect of the control. And for design effectiveness, I assess whether the control is appropriately designed to mitigate the identified risk. For instance, the control might require that access rights are reviewed every quarter. So I will check if there's a documented process for this. And for operating effectiveness, I will perform the testing by selecting representative samples and evaluating the control operation over a specific period. I also select the sample periods, so let's say last 6 months or 1 year, and I check if the access rights were conducted timely. So here what happened, there was a policy for access control and I will basically collect the logs from the systems to verify is this followed properly or not. And I document all the findings and have a discussion with the control owner to ensure I understood everything correctly. And in the report, I will make sure I will look for the accuracy and completeness. So when I'm presenting the risk, so I will document the risk, I will document the threat, I will document the vulnerability, and I will also document the recommendations. Action plan will prepare by the business owner. So this is how, I will basically handle such kind of queries. So let's move to the question number 2. Okay, second question is describe a specific instance, okay, where your testing identifies significant control gaps and how did you handle it and what was the outcome. Now this kind of a question tests your leadership skills, test your common sense, test your patience, and it basically give the visibility to the interviewer how to fix your role or how to use your profile in the projects. And a lot of users, a lot of students basically got this question. So I thought, let me add this. So it's a very common one. Okay. So question is how to answer. As I said, you need to speak in such a way that it reflects your experience. So your response should be like, at a previous organization during ITGC, I discovered, there is a user access review was not being performed consistently, which is leading to the potential unauthorized access. It means that, okay, we have a process called, we issue the identity, then we basically manage the identity, and then we revoke the identity. So as per the user access, we issuing the identity, we monitoring the identity, but problem is that we're not revoking because revocation is a manual process. So me as a consultant, me as an auditor, I was doing this assessment, and during that I identify inconsistent user access review. What I discovered here is, I can see that a lot of people who left the company, still they have an access system. Okay. It means the employee who left the company or changed their role, they still has access to the system. This concept is called as a scope creep. Scope creep, access aggregation or scope creep, where you get more and more access and your previous access is not revoked. So what I did here is I immediately issued to the management, because that time the company very small. In your case, you have to report to the respective lead of the IDM. See, I'm doing an assessment. Okay. So I will prepare the complete report, but this is something very critical. So I will immediately notify and I will document that in a report. So here what I did is I immediately escalate this to management and highlighting the risk. Okay. I highlight the risk associated with this deficiency. So I raise this issue with the IT manager, and I also give the emphasis, the risk of the unauthorized access. And what happened then is we actually immediately set up the meeting with the senior management to discuss the implications and necessary action. I also work with the IT team to design more robust access review process and implement the automate tool to ensure we have a regular review. Then what happened is we have redefined the process to make it more straightforward. We also conducted training sessions to ensure that all relevant staff understood their role in this process. And as a result, the organization significantly reduced the risk of unauthorized access, and subsequent audits confirm the effectiveness of a new process. And within a few months, the organization had a new system in place, and follow up the audits show that the access review has been performed consistently, and we significantly reduce the unauthorized access. So this kind of a thing here, what happened with your audit, with your assessment, okay, you're bringing a confidence. And by this kind of a response or this kind of a case study is basically giving a positive impact to the interviewer. Okay, so he handles such kind of a case and he has a good skill to present issues to the board also and present issue to the management also. Okay, so that is how we have handled the situation. So let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, next question is, when drafting a report on ICT control gap, what key element do you include to ensure clarity and usefulness for stakeholders? I repeat again the question document. When drafting a report on ICT control gap, what key element do you include to ensure clarity and usefulness for the stakeholder? See, normally what happens by asking this question, they want a clarity about how you good with the concept, how you can convey the management, because you are the person who basically identify the gaps. You are the one who recommending a controls. So here it basically tests your explanation. It basically tests your quality of how you define the things. And that is why this is a very important question which is asked in the or important question which is basically asked in the interview jobs. Okay, so question is how to answer this. As I said, you have to start the statement which reflecting your experience. Okay, so let's take example. If you ask me, I will say in my report I always include the executive summary which basically highlight the key findings and their implications, because there is no point of adding too many data because they have a very limited time. So we will only show them what is basically relevant. Okay, we basically show them what is basically relevant. So we have an executive summary with the key findings and their implications. Second is each identified gap is basically described in detail. We have to define this all the gaps which is in detail. I'm not saying I'm going to document all non-critical, critical, whatever the critical we have to document. Is it clear? So we will identify all the gaps and we describe that in detail, including your what you call the control objectives. Give me a second. We talk about control objective is there. Okay, we look for the deficiency. We look for the potential risk. So these are basically things I will look for. Next is basically we're talking about root cause. Definitely once you identify the gap, okay, you do the root cause. So I will also provide the root cause, because let's take example is I have discovered one finding like change management documentation is missing and I present same to the board. Now board has said we already have a approval for that. So sometime what happened, finding for me is already a risk exception for them. So I need to tell them a root cause. Okay, why are you saying this? What is the reason? If you not document, what is the impact? So we need to provide the root cause analysis holder to understand why this gap is exists. For example, if there's a gap in the change management processes, I explain them how the lack of formal approvals, okay, could lead to the unauthorized change that might disrupt the business operation. So that is how we basically talk about the root cause analysis. So this is something is a practice we have to follow. Then I will also recommend the practical and prioritize based on a risk, including a specific action. So my recommendation should not be very expensive. It should be cost effective. So I will give them a recommendations. Okay, include the specific actions that has been taken to, remediate the issues. And I also include the appendix with detailed evidence or any relevant, supporting documentation to ensure the transparency and traceability. So that is something is basically has been followed. Okay. So more of the story that I will start with, say like in my report, I will include the summary, the findings and their implications. Then I will talk about the gaps, which is described in details. Then we talk about the control objectives, which can impact. Then we talk about the deficiencies. We talk about the potential risk. And I will tell, okay, I will also provide them root cause analysis, which helps the stakeholder to understand why the gap is basically exist. And I will also talk about with the examples. I also include the root cause to help the stakeholder to understand why this gap exists. And my recommendations are practical, which is prioritized based on a risk, which include your specific actions that can be taken to remediate the issue. I also include the appendix with detailed evidence or any relevant supporting documentation to ensure the transparency and traceability. So by referring such kind of a statements, it builds the confidence in the interview jobs and all that. Okay, so that's why I highly recommend that. So let's move to the next question. Thank you. Okay, so next question is provide an example of high quality report you have written. How did your recommendation lead to the improvement in ICT control? This is basically where they test your writing skills, they test your thought process, because your report basically play a very important role in the governance. So you have to see how you answer this question. So in my case, as I said, you have to start with the statement which reflect your experience. So as I said, you can say like this in one of the instances, thank for asking this question. In one instances, I conducted an audit for a financial institution where I identify multiple gaps in their change management process. Okay. Let me note down here is we have a change management process. Like one of the process was unauthorized change. Okay, and inadequate testing. Inadequate testing. So identify multiple gaps in the change management process, like unauthorized changes and inadequate testing before deployment. So my report detailed each findings. Okay, mostly I focus on the critical findings. So my report what detailed each finding include the lack of formal approvals. Okay, so I have documented one of the observation is lack of formal approval process and insufficient testing before deployment, like how the unauthorized change could lead to the system outage during a peak hour. So I explain everything in detail. Okay, so my report detail each finding including how the lack of formal approval process and insufficient testing before deployment, like how the unauthorized changes could lead to the system outage during a peak sales period. So I'm adding some business statement here. So I did like this, and I also recommend the in that particular audit I recommend the implementing a centralized change management tool and formalizing the approval and testing procedure. And after presenting that report to senior management, they basically act on my recommendation, because my recommendation was more business centric, which resulting in a more control and transparent change management process. And within a 6 months they reported a few systems outage. So within a 6 months they reported a few system outage, and their IT environment become more stable and more reliable and more effective. And this not only reduce the incident caused by the improper changes, but also improve the overall stability of the IT environment. So this is how I create a value in the IT functions. So if you use such kind of a statements, it give more visibility. So somebody is that, yeah, thanks for asking this question. In one of my instances, I prepared the report because I was documenting our findings related to the change management process. My findings was reflecting about how the change management process impact the business and everything. So I recommend them to have a centralized change management process, and they have appreciate my recommendations because it is a cost effective. And after that, they have seen that there's a positive change in the process. There's a less disruption of a system, more quality effectiveness. So this kind of initiatives is basically creating more value in the business. So when you present such kind of a statement, it give more value. Okay, so this is all from my side. Do let me know how do you find this particular new kind of a series, because I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube where they're just reading a statement and all that. If you talk about 2024 era, okay, you need to show your experience. Okay, so this is the kind of a video series we have where I will try to bring the experience. Okay, because I also worked as an internal auditor in Allianz, so I'm trying to bring that experience in that particular video. So do let me know, shall I make a part 2 also? And if yes, suggest your things in a comment box and let me know how to improve the session. And please do subscribe to the channel. I can see you just guys watching a video and not subscribing to my channel. So do subscribe to the video if you find useful, and click on the bell icon to make sure you should not miss the future videos on a similar topic. Good day. Bye.